Hi, I'm Lillian Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Building a Better You. And now, today we're going to be reading from the book of Luke, and we're going to be reading out of chapter 15, and that's under the heading of the parables of Jesus. Now, last week we discussed the Proverbs, and we found out that a proverb was a short statement that was describing an event or rules of conduct, but it was a short statement to give you an idea of what it was. Now, that was spoken by the son of King David, and he wanted us to learn about wisdom and knowledge and everything that goes with it so we could follow God's word. Now, today, the parable of Jesus is just that, because Jesus spoke in parables an awful lot. And all throughout the Bible, you'll see where he spoke in parables, not only to the sinners, but to any of his listeners, all the people that came to hear him. A lot of times he would speak to them in parables. So we're going to talk about some of his parables, but first let's find out what a parable is. Now, unlike a proverb, a parable is a short story, and that shows an example of something in real life. It shows something about maybe a moral attitude or a religious principle, but it's a comparison. But the short story can show you how it can relate to you in your actual life. So today we're going to go over some of the parables that Jesus spoke of and see the connection between the story, the example that he gave, and real life. And even though it was back then, these same rules or examples we could use for ourselves in our everyday life today. So let's go to Luke chapter 15, and we're going to do it in parts. We're going to read a few verses and stop and discuss that parable, and then I'll have a couple others, and we'll do them individually. Then drew near unto him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him. And the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners, and he eats with them. And he spake this parable unto them. And Jesus spake and said, What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after that which was lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he layeth it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying unto them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep, which was lost. I say unto you, likewise, joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth, more than over the 99 just persons who need no repentance. So he was using the analogy of the sheep. He's saying, although the man had 99 safe sheep, he was concerned with the one that was lost. And that's why Jesus said, likewise, in heaven, if there's one sinner that repenteth, that's worth having the same amount of joy over as this man had over one sheep. Because if the rest of the people have already repented, they need no saving. But the one that's lost needs saving. Now let's go to verse 8. And by the way, Jesus wasn't just saying that to the sinners or the people that were listening to him. He actually was saying that for the priest to understand that as well. Because, see, back then, the priests, they didn't have anything to do with these sinners. They said, oh no, what is he doing? They couldn't believe that he was even associating with them. But he was associating with them because they were the ones that were lost. Now let's go to the second parable, and this is the lost piece of silver. Now this says, verse 8, what woman having 10 pieces of silver, if she lost one piece, does not light a candle and sweep the whole house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she had found it, she called her friends and her neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I had lost. Likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth. So again, Jesus is making the analogy. He's still saying there's just as much rejoicing over one sinner repenting. The angels in heaven rejoice over that just as much as the lady rejoiced when she found her coin. Now, in both of those analogies, they wanted to celebrate that with their friends. The man who found his sheep and the woman who found her coin. Now, think about that, especially the one about the coin, because that's happening even now. I can say, let's say you had $20 and five of them were $1 bills. And you looked in your wallet and now you've got four $1 bills. And you're saying, well, now I know I had $20. Now it's like, what? Did I use that dollar for something? Did I buy something? Did I put it in a pocket somewhere? And although you had the 19, you're still concerned about what? The one that's missing. So now you're searching around in your pockets and trying to figure out, did I spend it? Did I lend it to somebody? I know I had $20. So let's say you find it over there on the floor beside the chair and say, oh, there it is. I must have dropped it. But the point is, you're rejoicing by yourself because what? You found the one piece that was missing. And that again is how you can use these same analogies in your own way of life. Now the third one, I know a lot of you have heard this one before. It's the parable of the lost son. Now let's read through this first and then we'll come back and discuss it. A certain man had two sons. Now the younger son of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he did. He divided it among them. But not many days after that, the younger son gathered up everything he had and took his journey to a far country. And there he wasted his substance with riotous living. Wow. And when he had spent it all, there arose a great famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. And he said, the man he had to work for, he had to become a citizen in the country he was in because he lost all his money. So the man sent him to work in his fields to feed the swine. And he would have fain filled his belly with the husk of the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and I am not worthy to be called thy son. Make me one of thy servants. So he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and compassion he had, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and be merry. For this son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found. Now, let's stop there and go back and let's see what that's saying to us. Now, we know he had two sons, and we know the younger one, he wanted his money now. Again, wanted to get what was coming to him instead of waiting for his inheritance. He said, Give me my portion. Give me my portion now. Because he wanted to go live his life the way he chose, which we spoke about last week, the fast way and the slow way and the wide path and the narrow path. He wanted to take the wide path. So he did. His father gave him his portion. So that's why he gathered up all his belongings and went on about his business. And he was having a great time. He took his journey into a far country. But then in verse 13 it said he wasted all his substance. And his substance was all his wealth. So it didn't take him much time. He wasted all his money with riotous living. And riotous, that's like wild, night, day, night, anything goes, like we said on the wide path. Just do what you want. Anything goes. No rules, no regulations, no work, no nothing. And that's what he did. He had the time of his life. But then once he had spent all his money, at that particular time, they had a famine in the land. And he began to be in want. That means he began to get destitute. He didn't have anything. So that made him become a citizen of that country because that's the only way he could get a job. But the job he got was what? Feeding swine. Feeding swine. That's all he could do. And he would fain have filled his belly with the same husk. And to feign means he would be glad. He would have gladly filled his belly with the husk. The same thing he was feeding the pigs, he was willing to eat. He didn't have a choice because it says right here, no man gave unto him. So where was all the friends and all the people he was having a good time with? When he had money, everybody was his friend. Everybody was with him. And now he has nothing. He's destitute. He's desperate. Now he's eating what he's feeding the pigs. He has no roof over his head. He has no clothes. He has no food. And no man gave unto him. Now, in verse 17, it says, when he came to himself, which means when he realized how ridiculous he was living. He was like, if I were home, how many hired servants does my father have? And they always have bread enough and even some to spare. And I'm here dying of hunger. And he's thinking, what is wrong with me? So now he's thinking, I gotta go back. I gotta go back. I can't live like this. I know what I'll do. Now he's going to rehearse what he's going to tell his father because he wants to get back in his good graces because he has nowhere to live. He's eating with the pigs. So he's saying to himself, he says, I'll just say, okay, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before thee. And I'm not worthy to be called your son. Just make me one of your servants. I'll work for you. I'll become a hired servant. Just let me come back. So he decided that's what he was going to do. So he arose and he came to his father. So he was on the path going home. But his father saw him from a great way off. And his father couldn't believe what he saw. And he was filled with love and compassion. And he ran down the road to meet his son. And he fell on his neck and he hugged and kissed him. And the son was so glad to see his father. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father didn't even think the way the son was thinking. The father was so glad, so overwhelmed with joy to have his son back. The father said to the servant, bring forth the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring forth the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For my son who was dead is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. And they began to make merry. But what about the eldest son? Now let's read the rest of the chapter, starting in verse 25. Now the elder son was in the field, and as he drew near the house, he heard all the music and the dancing, and he called to one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And the servant said unto him, thy brother is come, and thy father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound. But the elder son was angry, and he wouldn't go in. Therefore came the father out and entreated him. And he answered, saying to the father, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son comes back, he's devoured all thy living with all the harlots and the good life. But yet you kill for him the fatted calf. And the father said, son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is now found. Now let's go back and just review those few verses to see what, again, this can be applied in our everyday life. So we know that the father was rejoicing. He was glad that the son had returned, the younger son, and he had this great feast for him because he was elated. But when the elder son saw this, when he found out, how can they be having all this for him? And he became angry. And he wouldn't even go into the festivities. But the father came out to him. And the father said, you've got to understand. The father entreated him. In verse 28 it says, the father came out and entreated him. And entreated means to request or to beg. He begged him to please come in and join us. But the son was so angry, all he could see was, all these years I worked for you. I never transgressed against you. Transgress means I never violated any of the laws you gave me, anything you told me. But now he went and spent all the money, gave everything away, has nothing, and yet, what did you do? You had a fatted calf for him. He did all the things he wanted to do. He did all the things he wanted to do, and yet never once did you have a fatted calf for me?" But the father wanted to explain to him. And the father said, "Son, you are ever with me, and all that I have is yours." It was meet that we should make merry. And in this instance, meet means it was very proper. It was necessary. It was necessary at this time to be glad because your brother was dead and now he's alive again. He was lost and now he's found. That's the importance of the whole thing. Now his family unit was complete. So all three of these parables had the one thing in common. The one piece that was missing now has returned, has been found, was lost, and now their unit is complete. The shepherd had all 99, but he couldn't have his flock be full without the one that was missing. And although the woman had 10 coins and lost that one, she still had 9, but her unit was not complete until she found the last coin. And the lost son, was lost because he wanted to live his own life his own way. So God had to find a way to send him back home. So when the famine came in the land, the son realized he could not survive. Everybody that wants to take that wide path we spoke about last week, the quick fix, all that brings, I said, was short-term satisfaction. And that's what he had, short-term satisfaction. But they all had the one thing in common. The one piece that was missing from all of them. Once it returned, once they found it, their unit was complete. You notice when he took the high path, what happened? His friends all left him high and dry. They didn't care about him. They didn't care about him at all. All the friends he thought he had, not one man, it said, would give him anything. Not one man. Now that's very sad. But he did what he chose to do. And that's why we have to learn to don't just jump up and do things impulsively. That's why last week we read about reading the Word and studying the Word. Because it's imperative that we understand and know. We have wisdom. We need wisdom. We need knowledge. We need understanding so that we can live the proper life. A lot of times God will let us be in situations because that's the only way he can get our attention. I've had some of those instances. When you hit rock bottom and you've done everything you thought you wanted to do, you thought it was going to be this way and it wasn't. So now what do you say? Oh, Lord, help me. But guess what? Just like his father received him back, God always receives us back. He never turns his back on us. We may turn our back on him. We may forget about him. We may forget his word. Just do, oh, well, I can do it this way. But he never forgets us. He never turns his back on us. And that brings me to the poem I want to share with you today. And it's called Follow the Father. I climbed the ladder to heaven. God let me look around. He said, this is not your home yet. You have to go back down. So here I am, still here on earth. I know God has a plan. All I must do is follow him and do the best I can. Sometimes we can't quite comprehend the path we are to take. So just sit quietly and wait on him. Then there will be no mistake. Learn not to question, just obey, for his way is always best. Pay close attention and follow his lead, and he will do the rest. And that's simply to say, follow God's plan. Even if you don't know what it is, follow his word. Do what he says do. Because he has a plan for you. We don't always know what it is, but he knows what it is. He knew what it was before we were even born. But you can't learn what his plan is if you don't read his word. Because everything in here will tell you what's in store for you, will tell you what to do by reading his word and believing in what is in his word and trusting him to do what he says he'll do. And the main thing I always remember is the main thing he said he'll do is what? I will never leave you or forsake you. How many friends do you have that can make the same claim? None? Probably not. Because nobody can do what God can do. So I'm going to ask you now, think about where you are today and how satisfied you really are. Are you, do you want to follow the world or do you want to follow God? It's your choice. We had a choice last week, the wide path or the narrow path. Think about that. Who can do the most for you? Just like these friends let him down, it'll happen in real life. That's why you can only trust in the Lord, because he can take you places you'll never go on your own. And my closing words for you today are, it's not the quantity of what we do, but the quality. So always give God your best. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.